Hey guys, this is Sean Kanan, and you are listening to the Then Is Now podcast.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
Warning! Warning!
Today's episode contains spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie or TV show that we are talking about, we highly recommend that you watch it first, then listen to this episode. Thank you.
Welcome to 13 Days of Hallowtober.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of That Is Now podcast. I am your host, Rigor. Today I am joined by first-time guest co-host Mark Bailey, who is an amateur animator, filmmaker, hobbyist, and monster movie/bad film historian. He's been a long-time attendee of sci-fi, comic, and horror conventions. His two lectures, Giant Monsters Attack New York City, A History, and Bad Film A Go-Go, have been successfully presented at EternalCon, Fanfare New York City, BorrowCon, WinterCon, G-Fest, and Icon. He lives in West Orange, New Jersey with his lovely and brilliant wife, Kara, and awesome cats, Els, Griffin, Roxy, and Cricket. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. How's everything with you?
Good. Things are good. Things are ramping up. I guess at this point when this airs, everyone knows we just started up a Patreon page and a T public page and stuff, so looking forward to seeing what happens for the show.
What are you raising? The show? Okay.
Yeah, we got
yeah.
bills to pay here.
Right.
Plus, we're expanding. We're doing a special show on Patreon that you can only get on Patreon. We're also doing a video series that's coming up, and we got a lot of fun stuff going on. So.
Well, good. I hope to expand your offerings and help you raise a little bit of money.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I saw that.
My pleasure.
So before we begin, you've got this kick-ass website that's a labor of love for you. Could you tell our listeners about it?
New York City Giant Monster Attack Map, nycgmam.com. There's an old software called Flash, and within Flash, I was able to make an animated web content, interactive web content. And having worked in and around New York City for years and watching a lot of monster movies, I started to be walking around and wondering, is this where Godzilla blew up the United Nations? Is this where the Deadly Menace got stuck in a tunnel between New York and New Jersey? Is this where King Kong met his demise at the base of the Empire State Building? And I knew that when they make movies, these are all Hollywood sound stages, or they were in a soundstage in Tokyo. And so they had to take certain liberties to make the film good and make it successful, and they couldn't exactly shoot in New York. And they had to pretty it up and move streets around and do all that kind of stuff. So I said, wouldn't it be cool to have an interactive map? One time I saw Turner Classic Movies with a tour bus with King Kong on the side of it, and when I was in Chicago, I went on a gangsters tour. These two guys dressed up like gangsters would drive around and tell you where the Valentine's Day Massacre was and all the great hits around Chicago. And I'm like, yeah, but what if there was a map for giant monster movies in New York City, and outside of Tokyo and maybe a couple of other select cities, New York City gets destroyed a lot. It gets destroyed a lot. It's iconic. It's a lot of play. It's a place that a lot of people want to be. It's a place where a lot of people want to visit. So they set a lot of monster movies and they set a lot of destruction films of, it's been nuked, it's been hit by, walls of water, meteors, all of that. So I decided to make an interactive map. And so far, I still have not exhausted the list of the number of times that New York has been destroyed in movies, television, and a couple of comic books.
Wow.
So the backbone was Adobe Flash, and that doesn't work anymore. You can still do things with it, but you can't upload the content. Modern web browsers do not recognize that content, so I had to find another way to go around and do it. And it's now finally web friendly. Like, you can look at it on your cell phone, you can look at it on your tablet, or obviously your PC or a laptop. It's just a bit of a beast to load. It takes about a minute. You'll get a little buffering icon, and it finally loads. So, and that has been my my labor of love. I've been dealing with that since 2017. All of my cartoons have gone the way of the dinosaur. I just finished school and I'm looking for work, and once I have more time, I'm going to go back and take all of my cartoons and make them forward compatible that people can actually see them. I'll probably just start a YouTube page and have and offer my cartoons that way. So,
and what's replacing Flash? I mean, I know every time I reboot my computer, it tells me, "Hey, Flash is going away."
It's called Adobe Animate. It's essentially the same piece of software, but how you export the finished file that you would upload to the internet is a vastly different creature than what it was a few years ago. The internet is not recognizing this old output. That's all. Right. That's why when you look at old Flash sites, it doesn't even have a placeholder. It just doesn't even show that there was content there. It's removed. So, it is what it is, and it just, you have to be creative and find ways to get your work out there. I haven't made any cartoons in a while. I recently graduated school, so I took a break from it. But at its height, I was making one cartoon a year since 2003. I won a little award at G-Fest for one of them. Most of my cartoons are pretty weird, and being a short filmmaker on your own is incredibly exhaustive. It's hard, and by the time you're done with this cartoon, you hate it. You're so bored with it. You're just like, this is dumb, I want it over with, but you have to see your projects through, or else you'll have nothing but a hard drive full of unfinished work. And that's no good either. So I'm certain you have similar stories of being up at 2:00 in the morning trying to get a podcast out.
Well, that, and I did work with Flash a couple decades ago when I had my website horrorhaven.com, and I was trying to make a TV player that you could click on the knobs and it would change the program that you were watching. Yeah. And with everything with the internet, I'm self-taught, and it got to a point where I just couldn't keep investing the time in training myself in that because I had other things that I needed to focus on for the project. Right. So I ended up abandoning it. So I do have some limited Flash skills, but at this point,
the novelty was just too taxing. The point. Why you're keeping it up? Fine. Fortunately, the technology behind the New York City giant monster attack map still is largely the same. Some of the coding behind it has changed a little bit, but I also have been keeping my toe in the water all these years that I can just stay on top of it. I'm also looking to get into work, doing animated web content and for marketing and what have you. So it's a shame. I would love to work for Spirit Halloween, and they are located in Jersey, but in the extreme southern part of the state, like near Philly. And I'm all the way near New York City, and I'm like, wow, I think that's just such a wonderful business model that they occupy defunct storefronts, like Toys R Us or what have you, and open up a store for 4 months. And it's considering the way the economy is going, I think that's pretty ingenious. And I would love to help their marketing and help their website.
Oh yeah, I bet you can do a lot of that remotely. Anyways, you probably wouldn't have to go there maybe once or twice.
Maybe with maybe with you as a reference, they'll he's the Then Is Now podcast man. Let him in. So I'll take it. Thank you, Rico.
Thank you, Rico. Oh, you're welcome. Gentleman. Yes, you're welcome. And I got to say that, you know, when you sent me the link for your website and I was on it and I was going through it, it's one of those rabbit holes that once you start going down, 3 hours will pass by and then you come back up and go, oh my God, I just spent 3 hours
Really?
looking at all this amazing stuff.
Wow, I've made a nostalgia hole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good. I highly recommend that the listeners check it out.
Great.
Once again, what's the website?
nycgm.com. New York City Giant Monster Attack Map. You truncate that.
Awesome,
Okay.
awesome. Well, that's great. So let's get into the movie here. We are continuing our yearly event called 13 Days of Hallowtober. Our theme this year is modern zombie films, and what that means is that we're not going to cover zombie films from before 1968, like White Zombie, Teenage Zombies, you know, any of those Bela Lugosi type movies. No, we are covering the ones that came after and were inspired by George Romero's Night of the Living Dead in 1968.
Right.
Now, Night of the Living Dead not only set up the rules for modern zombies, it's had a lasting effect on horror filmmaking for the last 50 years. So today, we're going to cover the Korean zombie film Rampant from 2018.
All right.
Class is in session.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up. Class is in session.
That's totally fine.
제 눈으로 똑똑히 확인했습니다.
물렸느냐?
강림대군이 금일 제물포에 도착한다 합니다. 놈들이 피냄새를 맡았습니다. 서두르십시오. 야구? 눈이 변하고 송곳니가 돋습니다. 소자에게 군사를 주십시오. 아니 되옵니다, 전하. 조용히 돌아가시지요. 그리하면 내 살려는 드릴 테니. 이번에도 당신네들 뜻대로 될 거란 착각 마시오. 야주를 막지 못하면 끝장이다. 나를 따를 것인가? 땅에 묻힐 것인가?
In the Joseon dynasty, King Lee Jo is viewed as overly deferential to the nearby Qing dynasty of China. His son, Crown Prince Lee Young, plots to buy European arquebuses, which is a form of long gun that appeared in Europe and the Ottoman Empire during the 15th century to drive away the Qing. The plot is exposed by War Minister Kim Ja-joon, who holds influence over the king and frames it as a rebellion. Kim meets the Europeans and learns that they've brought zombies called night demons. The crown prince commits suicide as penance so that his subordinates will be spared. Joseon forces destroy the European ship and retrieve the arquebuses, but a Joseon soldier is bitten by a zombie. He returns to his village where he turns and spreads the infection. The zombies crave human meat and blood and are attracted by sounds, repelled by sunlight, and are stopped by decapitation or piercing of the heart. The crown prince left a request that his wife, Gyeong-bin, and unborn child be raised by his younger brother, Lee Chung, in China for their safety. Lee Chung had previously been left out of Joseon's order of succession and grew up abroad in the prosperous Qing. Lee Chung returns with his companion Hak-soo, landing in Jemalpo, but is attacked by Joseon assassins sent by Minister Kim and other ministers who are plotting a coup. The noise of the battle draws an attack by zombified villagers. Lee Chung and Hak-soo are assisted by local partisans, including Park Yul-ryong, former lieutenant to the crown prince, and beautiful archer Deok-hee. The Jemalpo partisans ask Lee Chung to become crown prince, but he declines, wanting to return to China. Lee Chung awkwardly flirts with Deok-hee. The only survivor of the would-be assassins is captured by Kim because he's infected. The ministers arrange for a concubine to be infected from this captured assassin. She later turns and infects the king. Lee Chung arrives at the king's court where he requests an army to crush the zombies in Jemalpo. The king initially agrees, but the ministers instigate him to rescind the order, claiming that there's no zombie outbreak, only a civil rebellion. The Jemalpo partisans are arrested, while Lee Chung and Gyeong-bin are ordered to attend a banquet for a visiting Qing delegation. At At the banquet, the king fully turns into a zombie and is slain by Kim, who unleashes zombies there in an attempt to kill members of the palace and the Shing delegation, then rule with all potential opposition gone. However, Kim himself is bitten by a zombie, leading to the ministers attempting to, in turn, kill him. Kim slays them all, chops off his own hand to slow the infection, then declares himself king. Yongbin convinces Lee Chung not to flee but to protect the people, so Lee Chung and the royal guard free his Jamopo allies from prison. They engage the zombies in combat in an attempt to prevent them from escaping the palace and attacking the capital. Lee Chung and his allies plan to draw the zombies together into a gigantic fiery explosion at the palace. Kim kills Haksu and an infected park, preventing the explosion. Lee Chung continues the same plan, battling a horde of zombies and the half-infected Kim. While doing so, he pours oil on the floor of the palace. Deok Hee fires a flaming arrow into the place, burning it down. Lee Chung retreats to the roof of the palace, only to find that Kim has also climbed to the roof. There, they have an epic duel, not only fighting for their lives, but also the entire kingdom. So, Mark, you suggested this film.
I did.
When did you first see it, and what was your first impression?
I loved it. I really did. I'm looking at the back of the DVD. It's called Game of Thrones meets 28 Days Later. It had for a really incredibly creative modern zombie film. It also has all the political trappings of feudal Korea. It's all these sub-ministers and the plotting of what it is to take over a kingdom and unwilling heroes, and it was cool. I think I saw the trailer for this movie online maybe a decade ago, and I knew about like Train to Busan and some other Korean films beforehand, and I knew I wanted to watch it. In 2006, I had the pleasure of seeing The Host in the theaters, and it was in an art house theater out on Long Island, and it was great. That really just blew me away, and it introduced me to modern Korean cinema. And that actor and director and probably a number of other people would go on to win an Academy Award or awards with Parasite. So, these guys really know their stuff. They make very good movies. They're very good writers. They hire very capable actors. All the actors are incredibly good looking. They're just really nice to look at, and being talented actors, you sympathize with them. You follow along that with the journey of their storytelling.
Oh, absolutely.
And then finally, I knew about their other zombie films, and I saw that this one was set in feudal Korea. I was also a fan of a movie called War of the Arrows.
Okay.
It's set in feudal Korea, and I think Northern Korea was invaded by kingdoms from China, and this guy has to fight to get back his sister and brother-in-law, and it's largely based on archery, but it's just an incredibly good martial arts film.
Yeah.
And knowing that they could make good movies with swashbuckling films with bows and arrows and swords, and now they're throwing zombies into it, I'm like, well, I think this is certainly worth a watch. So,
yeah, I'm glad you suggested this because I just watched it the other day, and I had actually never heard of it. Although I did see The Host, I didn't see that in the theater, but I did see. I did catch that when it first came out. But I figured I have to say I was blown away by it. I mean, I love watching a film, walking into it with no preconceived notions. I literally had no idea. I didn't even look at the trailers, so I didn't even know it took place in feudal Korea. I just knew it was a zombie film, and I had to see it. So I love the concept. I like the fact that it was set in the 1600s. Yeah. I love how it looks visually. It's the stunning cinematography, and like you said, the cast was great. The characters were engaging. It had me right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And what I liked was that it was different and refreshing from most zombie films that are set in contemporary times. I have to say, I kind of did have a slight expectation walking in, only because my other show, The East Meets the West, we talk about Shaw Brothers films.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of expecting a little bit more wire work and acrobatics, and we didn't get that here, but it didn't matter. It didn't take away from the film at all. It just, everything they did, I thought, worked perfectly.
Yeah, and after 10 plus years of The Walking Dead, you just come to expect how shambling zombies are going to react. And here they took it a different direction. They said, you know, these things don't come out during the day. They can be stabbed in the heart and die. You know, they had a certain take on this iteration of what zombies are.
Right.
And in their other zombie films, that was not necessarily the case. You know, Train to Busan, they did have zombies out during the day, and it's just, I thought it was kind of neat that they were willing to bend the genre a little bit for the sake of, you know, of storytelling, and that was cool. I thought it was kind of brave of them, and yeah. So
I think I might have mentioned this on one of the other 13 Days specials that we're doing this year, but the thing about the modern zombie films too is we're seeing in the last few decades a similar thing that happened to the spaghetti westerns back in the early to mid 70s, is what was referred to as the deconstruction of the genre, because basically you can't keep retelling the same story over and over again. You know, Walking Dead is kind of like it might as well be a continuation of Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It works, and it's very well done, and it's more, you know, sometimes the humans actually are more scary than the zombies. But when you see things like Shaun of the Dead and Army of the Dead and this movie, Rampant, they're taking the zombie genre and saying, okay, how can we do this differently? How can we still make them scary zombies, but do it, you know, deconstruct the genre, so to speak? And I think this movie really succeeds. I mean, they don't even call them zombies. They call them night demons.
Yeah.
Their teeth become suddenly sharp for some reason.
These milky, their eyes get milky.
Yeah,
it's just creepy. I finished watching it like 3 hours ago, and I was in bed with my cat and the DVD player, and you just see these blood slathered creatures look up from a carcass that they're gnawing on, and they're just really, really good actors. Know how to act like they're all freaked out and diseased, and they're shambling about, and it was just creepy. So,
and you know, not all of them, but some of them do that weird body twisting thing that you see in a lot of Japanese horror films, where they just contort themselves in these unnatural ways, and that in and of itself is kind of freaky.
They jerk, right? Like they just kind of flail about a little bit, and it's incredibly unnatural. It looks like they're like dying and being born at the same time, but it's incredibly unnatural and unholy. It's good. Ugh.
Yeah,
don't touch me.
So let's talk a little bit about the cast and the crew.
Please.
We've got the director is Sung Hoon Kim. He directed a film called Gonjo, also known as Confidential Assignment, that also stars Hyun Bin, who is the star of this film, Rampant. And he did another film called My Little Hero. I haven't actually heard of either of those films. Have you seen them?
I have not. I honestly, it's where I'm from in North Jersey. We have a store called Big Lots, and they sell closeouts of a lot of items. And they usually have a Titanic DVD rack. Very few places sell DVDs. And I found this DVD. I buy a lot of my Korean films there, and I got this thing for like $3. So nice. I just happen to have known this title for years, and it was on my to-do list. So that's where I picked it up from. I have a number of other Korean movies, but I am not familiar with this director's work. That's on me, and so I'll fix that.
Yeah. I think so too. Same here. And, you know, I will let the listeners know, too, a lot of these, the writers, director, and actors, we don't really know the films that they've been in, and I'm sure the listeners at home probably don't know. So we're just going to introduce you to them and talk about them a little bit here.
Okay.
And maybe you, the listener, can go out and explore it on your own. Now, I did notice something. I don't know if you noticed this, Mark. On IMDb, when you look at the credits for writers, there's 3 of them.
Right.
Now, I'm going to say the third guy first, just because there's an issue with the first 2. Shin Yeon-won. Again, I don't know his films, but he did direct a film called 7 Days, which starred Yeonjin Kim. And when I saw her, I'm like, why do I know her? And I realized she played Sun on the TV show Lost.
Okay.
I think he wrote that, but he directed a film in 2019 called The Battle, Roar to Victory, which was the true story of the Korean battle for independence against the imperialist Japanese forces in Manchuria, China.
Yeah.
So, you know, this guy knows his way around period pieces, whether he's writing or directing, and he must obviously be an aficionado of that period of Korean history. And then now, did you notice that the other two writers, they're the same guy, just backwards? It's Jo Yun Hwang and then Hwang Jo Yun.
I did not.
And he's got two listings. One of them only has 3 writing credits, and the other one has 9 of them. And the only one that crosses over on both is Rampant. So I have no idea what's up with that.
Wow. Well, it's Korean. It's a translation. You know, who knows? I couldn't explain that for the life of me. So,
I mean, maybe he created an account, lost his password, and created another one.
I don't know. Somebody might have been populating that content. I know certain languages go forwards and backwards compared to English. Right. I honestly don't know. It's obviously it happens. So it's probably the one. It's probably the one person. So maybe this podcast will get them on their game and have them fix it.
Yeah, there we go.
You listening, Korea?
So let's say what?
I said, are you listening, South Korea? Gotta fix your IMDb.
Actually, I'll have to check. I think we do have listeners in Korea.
Yeah.
So let's get into the cast here. We've got Hyun Bin, who played Lee Chung, who is the current heir to the Joseon throne, who's arrogant and only wants to marry a girl to accompany to China. I thought he did a great job here. I mean, his character starts off as this entitled royal jerk. He doesn't really want to get involved. He's got no interest in the throne. And then ultimately, he becomes fashioned into a hero. And I thought that was a great character arc for him.
Yeah, absolutely. He was, I found a little, Han Solo turning into Luke Skywalker. A bit of both. And I loved his sword. He had this sword that was, it was like a broomstick with a blade. It was huge.
Yeah.
It was, and he would, these guys are all, they come from a country of brilliant martial artists, and the special effects work was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was just very, very talented actor. Neat guy. He had his partner, forgive me, I'll stop if you want to talk about, he had a sidekick.
Yes.
So if you want to talk about him, that guy was really neat too.
Yep. Let me just, Haksu.
Yep.
Yeah, he was played by Jong Man-sik. And he was, of course, the quirky bodyguard. He was great, I thought, as the comic relief. He was a little stereotypically cowardly, but he never let that prevent him from taking care of Lee Chung. Often he would stay Lee's hand to prevent needless combat. I really liked that.
He stopped him from pulling out a blade, and on that
a couple times
on that war minister, which would have gone horribly. And he was very, very comedic, and he was very self-centered. But when it came to protecting his prince, he was, very, very on the job. So
you know what he reminded me of? He reminded me of Mr. French from Family Affair.
Yeah.
He was this butler that was more than a butler.
Yeah, you would take that. You would take Mr. French, boating for some reason, or you would take Mr. French to France,
right?
or you would take Mr. French to your cooking class, depending on what the writers need.
Right. And he'll stop you from slicing someone up with a butcher knife.
Now put that down. So
now we've got Jang Dong-gun, who played Kim Ja-joon, the corrupt minister of war. He was in 2 record-breaking box office hits in Korea, a movie called Friend in 2001, and Taegakgi, The Brotherhood of War in 2004. And he was good. For some reason, I kept thinking he looked like the guy that was in Army of the Dead, whose name escapes me at the moment. But I felt like I had seen him before, but I guess I haven't, because when I looked at his list of films, I hadn't seen any of them. But he was really good, too. He just had those eyes. Like, he worked his eyes really well.
Yeah, it takes a great actor to be that unlikable. And not really ape the camera or ham it up too much. I mean, the guy was a very capable actor. Forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but and then when he slowly became like quasi-zombie, quasi-human, and that was fascinating. That was kind of a neat plot twist, that he was infected and he cut off his own hand, but you could see the infection starting to take over his body, but he could still walk around the demons and not, without being infected. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Whisperers on The Walking Dead. So
he's definitely, it seemed like he was morphing into something different, something a little bit more.
Yeah, and then there was a scene where this guy, he had to cut up his own hand, and he finds the king's robe. He finds this very elegant red robe, which is a high status. So you get to see this man who's just covered in blood and infections and one hand, and he's walking around with this elegant robe on, and he was quite, and his hair was finally a mess, and the man lost all of his composure, and he was just this new zombie king, which I guess he was going for. It was cool. It was just absolutely brilliant villain.
Oh yeah.
Like, wow, that's new. So
yeah. Hi, this is Rigor, host of Then Is Now podcast and The East Meets the West. I just wanted to say thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. We appreciate your support as we grow the audience for our shows. You could find our links to our Patreon page as well as our TeePublic page at havenpodcasts.com. With Patreon, you'll get a lot of exclusive stuff, including our monthly pop culture newsletter, cool gifts, discounts for TeePublic, and our special exclusive show, Then Is Now Filmmakers series, in which we interview directors, producers, writers, composers, special effects guys, basically anybody who works behind the scenes in film and television, and get their insights into the process of creating films and TV shows. Also at our TeePublic page, you'll find cool merch that you can get or even give to others as gifts. You can find those links at our website, or you can go directly to tpublic.com/stores/havenpodcasts and patreon.com/thenisnowpodcast. Enjoy!
Are you a lifelong fan of General Hospital?
Are you a new fan who wants to know more about the history of the show?
Do you enjoy talking about the show with others?
Do you find yourself yelling at the TV?
Is your self-care an hour a day in Port Charles?
If so, we invite you to join hosts
Amanda Kimmel
and Shannon Coach at the place where all the hidden conversations take place and secrets are revealed.
Meet us at Pier 54,
a General Hospital fan podcast.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, we have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil. And our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't. Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
And speaking of the king, Kim Wee-sung played King Lee Jo, who was the king of Joseon. He delighted in luxury. And this guy, you know, he's the stereotypical royal douchebag here, but he played it perfectly.
Yeah, he did.
You know, and he was the main antagonist, Young Suk, in Train to Busan.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good, and we will be covering that movie here on 13 Days. Moving right along, we've got Jo Woo-jin, who played Park Yul-ryung, one of the three protectors of Jamulpo, who accompanies Chung during the virus. He was in a film called The Fortress, which took place in 1636, and it was about a king who hides in the mountains to avoid being part of the Shing dynasty. So we're seeing similar themes here, you know, and from the pictures of that, it was interesting. They also had those pilgrim-looking hats like they did in this movie.
Yeah.
And
that's right. It was kind of they look very shady, you know. And I guess after a while, when you see 400 people wearing them, they don't look weird. They don't look like pilgrims anymore.
Right.
And they're carrying big swords, so you're not going to make fun of them.
But what's his name? Lee Chung reminded me of Solomon Kane when he first showed up with that hat on. I don't know if you're familiar with the character.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, he's a Puritan witch hunter who fights all kinds of supernatural stuff, and I liked that initial looking at him. But looking at these movies that these guys have been in, and how a lot of them take place in the 15th century, you know, it seems to me that era is still prevalent in the minds of Koreans. I mean, I don't know anyone who's from Korea. I don't know really anything about their culture, but looking at the fact that in the last decade, so many similar films have come out about that era, I'm wondering if that's something that's, for some reason, it's you know, brought up in their collective consciousness again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a country that's, you know, broken into. Unfortunately, that's weighing heavily on their public psyche, like the collective psyche. North Korea constantly has nukes pointed at them. They were an incredibly abused part of Japan's empire for a very long time. They were routinely invaded by the Japanese and by the Chinese.
Right.
And they finally get to have movies of where they're the good guys and things actually went their way. I noticed a lot of out of the Korean films that I do own, it's a couple of monster movies, 2 zombie films, and a few. They make a lot of movies about the Korean War, which are, I know this is well outside of the purview of what you're doing, but these are incredibly powerful war films about what happened during the Korean War.
Huh.
Very well made, and they're not stiff at all. These things are incredibly well paced.
Wow.
So
that's cool.
Yeah.
And finally, I wanted to mention Lee Sun-bin, who played Deok Hee, the archer, and the second protector of Jamalpo, the one who Lee Chung has a crush on. I thought she was very cute, first of all, and I really liked her character too. She was the only archer, as far as I could tell, in the film. You know, her and Chung had a bit of an arc where he was hitting on her at first, and she was really only concerned with saving her people. But I like how that dynamic played out. I liked how, you know, he kept saying, "Well, come to China with me, come to Xing with me," and she was like, "Well, we got to save these people." And he's like, "All right, if I bring you an army, will you come with me?" And she's like, "Yeah, okay."
She's like, "Yeah, right." And then son of a gun, he actually forms the army.
Right.
No, she was great too. It's funny that we're looking at one of these movies that kind of remind me of a pirate film that they have. It's all swashbuckling swords and bows and arrows, and they also have firearms. They have, you know, era specific firearms, muskets, for lack of a better term. And here she has a bow and arrow, which is kind of cool. Got quick reloads and stuff like that. So
yeah, those guns were called. I keep wanting to call them arabesques. They're arquebuses.
Arquebuses.
And I had to look that up, but they're basically, you know, the first form of rifle. They're these long guns that they had. And one other actor I forgot to mention actually was Kim Tai-woo, who played the Crown Prince Lee Young, who ends up killing himself. I don't know why Wikipedia lists him as a special appearance. Apparently, he must be a big star in South Korea, but I guess he was originally the role was supposed to be played by Kim Joo-hyuk, and he passed away.
Wow.
So Kim Tai-woo came in. So I don't know if maybe special appearance, meaning like he took over the role in honor of Kim Joo-hyuk, or I really have no more information beyond that. I apologize to the listeners.
It's also Wikipedia. We're kind of at the mercy of somebody who's populating that page. So
that's true.
You're probably right. This is not a slam against you. I'm just it's just whatever person that is giving that data. It's the best we can do.
As a side note, you know, Wikipedia is just it's encyclopedia by general consensus.
Right.
So.
And don't get me wrong, I look at Wikipedia 3 times a week. It's it's my starting point, and then I'll go forward from there. So
right. So the film was financed and distributed by a company called Next Entertainment World.
Yeah.
They were the primary backers of Train to Busan and another film called Pandora, which I have not seen, but it sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Its budget was $15 million, but unfortunately it only grossed 11.8 million, so it's considered a bomb, and it got mixed reviews. And I read a lot of
That's terrible.
Critical reviews on this movie, and I totally disagreed with most of them.
What a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we have to wait for it to become popular over the next decade, and it may take another 10 years for it to actually turn a profit. So hopefully this podcast will start to turn things right.
Yeah, I definitely hope people seek it out. It is available on some apps, streaming apps, but you had to pay for it.
I think it was a $5 download, and I happen to own the DVD, so which ultimately what led me to you.
Right.
So yeah, I think it was just a $5 rent. So that's not terrible, and it's a very good film. If you and I are recommending it, and you and I are a couple of media powerhouses, so please watch this film.
So let's get into the film itself a little bit here. I felt like the opening sequence really set up the story well. With the zombie arriving on the boat, you didn't need a whole heck of a lot more than that. I remember watching it and going, oh yeah, they're in trouble. Just seeing the zombie, you didn't need or require any more setup than that.
Yeah, it was very well paced. You just see scenes of a boat on fire and shooting back and forth, and like, okay, something is going very wrong here. And you're brought onto the boat. You see what looks like a zombie. Somebody gets bit. And, all right, so you can take it from there. And it was very brisk. Brisk pace.
Yeah. Like we mentioned, they did a great job with the costumes. I thought the attention to detail was amazing. The set was really cool, and they did use a little CGI here and there, but it was really only to enhance things. Everything, for the most part, was real and practical.
Yeah. I did watch a movie recently where the whole thing was done on a soundstage, and they managed to use computers to generate an entire oil rig around the film, and they did a very good job of making that happen. So their ability to use computer graphics is that good that we also may not notice. So I just wanted to put that one out there, that the palace scenes were impressive. There was burning scenes at the end, and that boat on fire. So yeah, I would love to think that they actually built a gigantic wooden ship and set it on fire.
That probably wasn't, but the set itself of the palace was impressive.
It was cool. It was very cool. I would love to walk a soundstage. I really would.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And one thing I noticed too, that the director Sung-Hoo Kim used a lot of wide-angle shots in this movie, where you could really clearly see what was going on everywhere, especially in the fight sequences. And, we've talked about this on the East Meets the West, where a lot of modern, especially American films, the fight scenes have 30 edits per second, and you can hardly see what's going on. But in this, you didn't have that. You could clearly see what was going on in all the fight sequences.
Yeah, the extras on the DVD showed a little bit of wire work where the hero would kill one zombie and then run up the shoulders of another onto like a second-story railing of the palace. And it was a brilliant scene. It was really cool, the way they shot it, and they had to choreograph all the demons running towards the guy, and he managed to get onto the back of one, onto the shoulders of another, and kind of hopscotch to this one railing. It was neat. It took a wide-angle lens to do that. It took it took a careful establishing shot to make that happen. And also the scene was only 2 seconds long, but critical to the movie.
Oh yeah, especially at that point in the movie where it happens. And it's funny too, because I think I saw the same video that you're referencing on YouTube, where it was only a couple minutes long, but they kind of showed you some of the wire work that they were doing. And another thing too that I noticed about this movie is that the color palette was very dark. I mean, part of it, of course, was that the zombies only came out at night, so a lot of the scenes were at night. But even in the daytime scenes, did you notice that the colors were kind of muted? The colors of the clothing for the court officials and the nobles were dark.
Yeah.
Yet Lee Chung, he starts out in dark clothing when he first comes to Joseon, but then when he gets to the royal court and you're getting towards him having to deal with what's going on, he's wearing all white.
Yeah. I mean, towards the end of it, anyone wearing white is just covered in gore and dirt and filth. No, it's just they're battle hardened at that point. And there was one scene where before the zombies had like an official attack on the court, there was a dance number where they had these gigantic, looks like peacock plumage, but these things are like 20 feet tall, and it was very, very pretty and very elegant. And these dancers were dancing around for the king who's about to become a zombie, and some kind of a visitor from a Chinese kingdom that they are subject to, and they were trying to entertain them. And I thought that kind of broke the color scheme that you were talking about. It showed how elegant and lovely everything is, and then the zombies attacked and everything is just covered in blood. And violence and just screaming and the gnawing, and it was the very stark contrast going from something very elegant and very pretty to absolutely horrific violence. So,
right. And one thing I read online too about Lee Chung's clothing in particular was that when he was wearing white, they made it properly ornate.
Yeah.
In terms of royal family, because I guess in Korea people wear white to funerals instead of black, so they didn't want him to be his outfit to be confused with funeral clothes. But even the other good guys, as much as they were covered in gore, they started off with white. So pretty much the good guys in this all wore white, which I thought was kind of cool.
And I noticed that there was a lot of earth tones during the day. Everything, there was just so much running about. I guess it kicked up a lot of dirt. And most of the day shots where everything was just dusty, kind of filthy. They spent a lot of time indoors in particular rooms where they stored gunpowder, so everything just had a very, very gritty, tactile feel to it. So it was neat. Yeah.
And I thought Hyun Bin, who played Lee Chung, I thought he's on his way to becoming a good action star. I think the other movie that we referenced that he's in, he was also an action star in that too. I think it was a crime thriller. And it was just funny. I mean, not funny, but it was amazing watching him, especially, single-handedly fending off the horde of zombies. And, there were moments that reminded me of Henry V because his sword is so large that at one point he's running through the horde and he stops, and then he sees through a giant doorway another half of the horde, and he just stops and sighs, and he's like, oh, God, there's more of them. And, it's got to be tiring to have to wield that weapon for as long and as much as he had to.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the actual physics and physicality of carrying such a weapon and delivering so many lethal blows, that's just exhausting. You wouldn't be able to lift your arms up, but suspend your disbelief. It was just he was just a very neat character, and a lot of little kids came out of there wanting to be him.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's funny too. Getting back to, you mentioned the wire work.
Please.
I thought I was happy to see they didn't overdo the wire work. It wasn't outlandish or silly. It was just enough that you could believe what the characters were doing,
Right. And these guys were just great athletes. He also did a lot of spinning and ducking and getting out of the way of things, which seemed a little more plausible than some of the more high choreographed work I've seen in some martial arts films that were, just ducking just at the right time. I'm like, how would you know how to do that?
Right.
So this guy just made it look easy. He made it look fun. So not much wire work.
Right. It was just enough. Yep. Like even some of the zombies had a little bit of wire work to them too.
Yeah, he threw some out windows and outdoors, and they were they crawled. It was creepy how they would like an infestation of bugs. They would crawl down the roof and then jump on people like face first, and just start gnawing on them. And that may have had some wire work too. That was pretty scary.
Oh yeah.
To see how.
Yeah, the movie definitely had thrills and chills.
Oh yeah, this movie moved. This thing had pacing. So.
Yeah. You know what's funny is when they were getting everything ready to, as I said in the synopsis, which by the way I've already had put a spoiler warning at the top of the show, cool. So don't worry about spoiling the film. But they were getting everything inside that one building to set it on fire, and the plan was to lead all the zombies, or as many of them as they could, into that building and set it on fire. And they bring this giant barrel in, and I thought it was a giant. I was totally mistaken for most of the last third of the film. I thought it was a giant barrel of gunpowder.
Yeah, so did I.
And even though it was turned out to be the drum, I'm watching it, and I saw the characters banging on the drum to attract the zombies. For whatever reason, my brain separated the two and still was expecting that there was a giant barrel of gunpowder in there. So when Lee Chung gets to the roof and it's on fire, I'm like, dude, you got to get out. I'm yelling at the TV. I'm like, you got to go. It's going to blow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
And when it finally didn't, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I think you've watched too many cowboy movies, or you've seen too many nefarious people blowing up bridges with huge kegs of gunpowder.
Right.
I mean, and a keg of that size, that would leave a crater. That would blow that palace to pieces and kill everybody within a 16th of a mile. I'm not an explosives expert, but yeah, I've seen this movie now twice, and I was suckered into believing that big drum was a keg of gunpowder. No, it was just they needed that drum to attract them. The
right,
sound.
Right,
and they even referenced it. That drum was a bit of a savior at the end of the movie, where they went off to help that one besieged town from the beginning of the film. They heard the drum in the distance, and that meant that the good guys were on the way.
Right, right. That was a really cool scene.
Yeah.
And this whole film is the way they structured it. I thought was really good, because they did spend a lot of time setting up the characters and the story in the first half.
Yeah.
But the second half really pays off. So even though the pacing is fast through the whole thing, the first half is a little bit slower. And I think people will kind of go, "Oh, what's going on with this movie?" But the payoff is worth it. You need to establish the story, the characters, the politics. Some elements I found a little confusing. I had to go and read the synopsis afterwards. But once you get to the second half of the movie, it doesn't matter. Everything works, and it just flies.
Yeah, and they managed to introduce what you want to see zombies, or when some people want to see martial arts or what have you. But they managed to sprinkle enough of the zombies in there to keep you going until it's a full-blown horror movie. So it's very well done.
And what's really cool too that I liked was the way the characters work together, to the point where the story, for purposes of the story, they start to whittle away at the good guys, and you get to the point where you're like, no, don't let him die. No, don't let her die. Oh man, it's like you're really pulling for the characters, hoping that as many of them as possible can get through it.
It looked like when the lead character's sidekick finally got killed, that was particularly heartbreaking, because to the end he was just telling his master and his friends to just go, and the villain has him pinned to the ground, and he just stabs him in the back, and it was really, that was hard to see, and the movie wanted to give you a sense of loss, obviously.
Right.
So
right. And his last words were basically, make sure you hang on to the talisman.
Right.
That I gave you.
Right. He made this little talisman for him, thinking that this little drawing on a piece of paper was going to protect him from evil. He was so militant about giving the lead character this talisman, and told him, you have to hold on to it. And that was his last words. And it was just very touching. So
yeah. Especially because he was the comic relief for the film, I thought it really kind of made you like him a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so when he does perish, it like you said, it really is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was.
Now, I watched a subtitled version. Does your DVD have a dub as well, or was it just subtitled?
I watch my movies with subtitles when I can. I like to hear although I don't understand the look of Korean, I like to hear the passion in their voice, or it's part of the acting for me. So yes, okay. I watched the subtitled version.
Okay, because I couldn't get my hands on an English dub. Usually I'll watch both, or I'll have the English dub on with the subtitles, and then I'll probably watch it first without the English, with the subtitles, and then I didn't actually get a chance to watch it a second time this go round. But I thought that with the subtitles, they were done very well.
Yeah.
They used a lot of colloquialisms, like even when Lee Chung's swearing,
Yeah.
you know, and he's not supposed to because he's a prince.
Right.
And he's like, "This is bullshit,"
Yeah.
and all that. And you know, I thought they did a good job with the dialogue.
Yeah, and making it relatable to a Western audience.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
I mean, I think the dubbing was only in French and Spanish, and
okay.
and American English. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to check out the if there's I'm sorry, you just said there is. I do want to check out the English dub at some point, but one other thing I wanted to mention about this movie is the slight inconsistency that pretty much almost every zombie movie has, and it's not really a criticism against the film at all, but it's basically it has to do with how long it takes for a bitten person for the infection to manifest. And they kind of do try to explain it in this movie a little bit, where, you know, basically how close to a major vessel was one bitten.
Yeah, they did.
But it's really, it happens when it's most convenient for the plot. Like the drummer, not the drummer, but the guy who had to bang the drum, he should have turned well before, because I think he got bit in the throat or the shoulder, right?
He was bitten kind of between the throat and the shoulder, yeah. And he was a very likable character. You know, I think they wanted to make his loss particularly stinging. So
right. You wanted to see him struggle at that last minute and you know, light the fire before he turned completely.
Right. And the villain came along and fouled that whole plan and took the movie in a whole other direction. So.
Right.
No, that just seems to be somewhat of a trope that they had their own take on, and you know they knew they wanted to draw his turning into a zombie out for a particular reason. So.
Right, and it worked.
Yeah,
it totally worked for the story. So, Mark, anything else that you wanted to talk about in this movie?
No, I think I'm okay. Is this the first time you had seen it?
Yes, I'd never heard of it until you mentioned it.
That's awesome. I'm so flattered.
Yeah.
Well,
so I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, you and I were just chatting on Facebook and talking about zombie films, and when I suggested Rampant, you were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And like unless you instantly looked it up and found out that it was a Korean zombie film, I didn't know that. I thought you had seen this.
No,
I thought you had seen this, so
I think you had said that it was a Korean zombie film, and that's all I knew about it. That's why I said I like walking into movies where I have no idea about it at all.
No, I'm flattered. Sometimes I have incredibly weird tastes in movies, and I'm not saying my tastes are good or bad. I like what I like because I like it, and I do a presentation about bad movies. So I can see the value in Plan 9 from Outer Space is, the most successful bad movie ever made, and it's immensely entertaining. Yep. So I can look at things and see some worth. There are a lot of bad movies out there, but I'll say, okay, yeah, but the special effects in this particular moment or that particular moment were successful.
Oh yeah.
It's not as black and white. So for me to actually see that I can influence somebody that actually has a bit of taste, movie.
I know people who would disagree with that, but
we're in good company. It's strange. I am a bit of an aficionado in just weird and eccentric films that most people leave them. What are you watching? So
right.
So I'm not all that bad. So thank you. You validated me.
Oh, well, you're welcome. So, Mark, your final thoughts on Rampant?
I would recommend seeing it. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. The characters are very likable. The movie has a brisk pace. I think it has a lot in there for everybody. If you're into sword fights, it has that. If you're into zombies, it has that. If you're into quasi-period pieces, it has that. So watch Rampant. Your Uncle Mark tells you.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I mentioned, I read a lot of criticism about the movie, especially when they compared it to Train to Busan.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can compare the two movies.
No.
They're two completely different films. But I thoroughly enjoyed this film.
Yeah, you could see that the Koreans were into zombie films and they wanted to try something new. Also, if anyone does watch this film because I told them to, and doesn't like it, please let me know, and I apologize. Have your own opinion. I recommend watching it and making your own opinion.
And keep it to yourself.
No, I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to, I think people will like it. I have a sneaky suspicion that people will like this film. You're listening.
I mean, I was on the edge of my seat through the whole film.
Yeah.
I loved the characters. Like I said, I did find it a little bit confusing in the first half, but I think that's probably because my knowledge of Korean history is not that good. So I had to look up some of the names of the towns and stuff. But once you finally get the gist of who's who and what's going on, it was a really fun ride, and it was scary.
Yeah.
The zombies were truly horrifying. I usually, like I said before too, I usually try to watch a film twice when I prepare for a show, and I only have time to watch it once. But I actually can't wait to watch it again. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Let me know if you want to discuss any points. I'm totally available.
Awesome.
And,
awesome. Well, go ahead.
Please, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, I was going to say thanks for joining me today, Mark. Well, welcome to the show. We'd love to have you back in the future to talk about more monster movies, bad movies, whatever you want.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm totally available. I'm a recent convert to your podcast. I think I'm up to episode 5. And
awesome.
When you were just a little guy, when you were a youngin.
Yeah. And my son was my co-host, and he was a youngin too. He was only 16 on those first few episodes. So can you once again tell the audience where to find your website online?
nycgmam.com. It's the New York City Giant Monster Attack Map. And you can probably find my contact information through that. And I would love to know what you think of it. Anything that's wrong with it, any little mistakes that I've made, any little misspellings, I appreciate people telling me. Let me know. I put a lot of work into it. I'd love to hear what people have to say.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mark. We'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, folks, thanks for joining us today for our special 2021 13 Days of Hallowtober series, where we focus on modern zombie films. You can send your feedback to thenisnow42@gmail.com. You can also join in the conversation at our Facebook Then Is Now podcast group. Then Is Now podcast is a proud member of the Dorkening Podcast Network, so please be sure to check out the other great shows there at thedorkening.com. You can also visit our website at havenpodcasts.com, where you'll find our sister show, The East Meets the West, in which we discuss Shaw Brothers films and spaghetti western movies. And Then Is Now is on YouTube, so please visit youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1 to get the latest videos as well as other fun videos. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and also share the video versions of our podcast with your friends and get them to subscribe as well. Don't forget to go wherever you download your podcast from and leave us a great review so more listeners can find us. You can find us on all the podcasting apps, especially the big 3, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Class dismissed.
Then Is Now podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Jupiter Media.
For more shows like the one you just heard, check out the Dorkening Podcast Network at thedorkening.com.